I've had almost the best scenario to where I've had to confront mortality of someone who I care very much about without it actually coming to the fact of losing someone. And
Yeah.
so I got to learn a lot of the lessons without having to feel a lot of the pain, which was also, and that's about all the detail I feel comfortable sharing. But that was another
Yeah.
thing to where a lot of my experiences and a lot of my perspectives come from that, and realizing that you can't take anybody for granted, and you can't take anybody's life for granted or your own life for granted. The last one being, this one's a really small one, but I grew up very skinny, just someone who was not outwardly confident really by any means,
Mhm.
and getting into the gym and sort of cultivating confidence through my body, and having people treat me differently was another area to where I think that I've grown. I sort of have a perspective on the ability to change oneself for the better through consistency, determination, but also that you can change. That if you don't like something about yourself, there are ways, and it might take time, but there are ways to change it. So, yeah,
Yeah, beautifully said. And there are so many things that I want to touch on there.
sure,
Going off the last part really quickly, when it comes to, being in the gym, I resonate a lot with the gym content that you've created, especially when it comes to you talking about the impact that the gym has had on you. And it's deeper than just having a physical transformation. It's the mental transformation that comes along with that, that I think has been so powerful for so many people, especially in the self-development space, and I think that is something that I'm always grateful for. One of the things you mentioned was, getting a look at mortality kind of face to face, when it comes to someone that, you love in your life. How did that shift your behavior of how you were before that and after that? And the reason I ask is because I think about a time in my own life, probably about 2.5 years ago, when I had a similar situation with a loved one. And ever since then, like, I have approached life completely differently and my behavior has significantly changed. I think we can experience something, but if our actions don't change from that experience, then, did we really learn? So how did your actions change and how you kind of present yourself to the world?
yeah. I think that it's sort of twofold. The one is how I sort of treat myself. The second one is how I treat others.
Mm,
And how I treat myself is just realizing again, I think that when people have to confront mortality for the first time, it is a profound experience, because especially when you're in a young teenage male, you feel invincible, and
yes.
for in a lot of ways you kind of are invincible, but that's not true for everybody. And so having to confront that, even someone who was in the same invincible stage as I was, seeing them at their weakest and seeing them, again, very close to sort of having it all be over, it made me be able to be like, okay, no, this whole life thing is not a given. And so I have taken a perspective of, okay, now there's a lot of things I want to do before I go,
Hmm.
and I need to basically ruthlessly try and achieve those things, and they may not be even concrete. It might not be a number, it might not be a title, but there are feelings, and there are emotions, and there are people who I want to share experiences with, that I think like, okay, I have to do these things. Like I have to. I can't sit on my couch and play video games all day,
Mm,
because it could be gone. Yeah. And then the second fold, which I said is how I treat other people,
hmm.
is I think a lot of people are really, really good at masking what's going on in their own lives.
Agreed.
And yeah, and so after going through something like that, and that my whole family, and really it wasn't even how I but seeing how my parents and my dad would go to work and sort of just shut that all down, and just completely ignore it and go through as if nothing was happening. And I think a lot of people, again, are really, really good at that. I would actually argue that people are better at it than the people who are worse at it, in the sense that you have no idea. I think most people have no idea what's going on in people's personal lives, what they're going through. And so it allows you to offer the benefit of the doubt to people. I think of an analogy I heard, which was, if you cut somebody off in traffic, you're a lot more quick to give yourself affordances. Oh no, I'm a good driver, but this, that, and the other, right? Give yourself excuses. But
Hmm.
when somebody cuts you off in traffic, it's like, okay, they're a terrible driver. You immediately write them off. And it's like, okay,
Mm,
you need to be able to put yourself in some other else's shoes and be like, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what's going on. And I generally am a fairly forgiving person. I'm someone who haven't had my trust really betrayed on a level that would make me a cynical or a you know bitter person. But I'm very, very conscious of that. I don't know what's going on in people's lives, and not to pass judgment very quickly.
Beautifully said. It's this deep ability to put yourself in other people's shoes, which it sounds like, you keep at the forefront of your mind. And even I think about, small and silly examples sometimes backstage, like if a friend doesn't text back for like a week, my mind instantly goes to, okay, they don't care about this relationship anymore. But it's like, okay, wait, let me take a step back for a second and then realize that, hey, this person deserves just as much compassion. And what about the instances where I didn't text someone back for a week? Was that because I didn't care about the relationship, or was that because of something I was going through? And I think kind of that perspective shift is so powerful, and it comes from a really good place. So really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, man.
One of the things that I wanted to touch on is, the different types of content that you make. So, with having a variety of verticals, is there a type of content that you enjoy making the most? And what would that be? Or do you enjoy all of it equally?
No, I definitely enjoy making some stuff more than others. I would say that the sort of life content and the even the masculinity content are some of my favorite to make.
Hmm.
It tends to be the ones that don't maybe have the furthest reach, or also it's oftentimes somewhat controversial, and I fully understand that, and I own up to that. But I think that is some of the most fun for me to make for a number of reasons. I think that particularly when it comes to masculinity, I think that there's a lot of other creators out there and a lot of other influences out there that I disagree with. And I think that, young men today are in a kind of a weird situation. And so trying to be any kind of positive influence out there makes me feel like
Mm.
I could have an excised impact, an impact that's much larger than, for example, explaining a software engineering concept, which I also love doing. I'm very passionate about my career, about my job, about my field. And I
Mhm.
want everyone who could possibly be passionate about it as well to be able to explore that. But I feel sometimes I feel a little pigeonholed into that tech sector. And
Yeah.
so I would say that it's fun to be able to, explore other avenues.
Yeah, and when it comes to the masculinity content that you have made, I mean, you are speaking my language. I think that it's a concept that I have been consuming and studied and learned so much about, especially like the past like 2 to 3 years. And to your point, there are creators right now in the space that it's like, hey, you kind of hear their message, and you're like, ooh, like I don't know if that's the best thing for our youth to be hearing. And then you take it upon yourself to try and share a different message. And I would say, although it might not have the widest reach, it could have the deepest for the subset of people that, it does hit. And one of the concepts that you talk about is, masculinity is, currently in a crisis. What do you think that crisis is, and why do you think we're currently in that place?
Sure. So I think that the world has changed undeniably over the past probably 40 years. And I think that women have made a lot of strides, and femininity in general has made a lot of strides. Obviously, I think that there's a lot less stigma around women making a lot of money, or women going into the workplace, or
Mhm.
women taking things upon themselves, which is all great. I think that additionally, masculinity has changed in the sense that we are responsible for a lot of things that we maybe weren't responsible before. Obviously, there was the whole Me Too movement, and there was a lot of things that were very good. But what that means is that I think masculinity hasn't had the sort of full rebirth in 2023 that makes sense. It doesn't have a
Mm.
an identity that's well defined. And so what that means is there's a lot of young men growing up today who are, that's the time, right? When you're supposed to become a man, when you're going from whatever age it is, but when you're supposed to become a man, all of a sudden now it's this nebulous thing, whereas it used to be somewhat better defined. And so I think that a lot of people are looking for that kind of, you should do this and be this and act like this. And it's not really out there. And a couple people who, again, I just don't agree with, came through really sort of loud and again, like confidently said, no, this is what a man is, or this is what a woman is. And it's very easy to gravitate towards that. And that's why I don't fault any of these impressionable young men for looking for idols, because there is somewhat of a void.